and the peaches and the corn are fantastic at the farmer's market. But also, there is some storytelling to be done, and it is, as much as it's preseason football, it's real season baseball, and stories get to my desk, and y'all know I love a great writer and a great sports writer and a great story and a great book. This could be a book. It is a long-form story that came to my desk over the weekend, and I think if you follow anybody in America who writes great writings, they were retweeting it this weekend because it's one of the best stories of the summer. If you have not read it, you should, and if you love baseball or hate the Yankees or ever heard of Hideki Irabu, and all of us young old-timers do, Ben Reiter has written really an incredible story, and I don't know much about it other than to have read it, and it kind of took my breath away because I was back in the real media before Mr. Angelos took my press pass 11 years ago, and I was in locker rooms with Hideki Irabu, and I remember George Steinbrenner and all of that back in the 90s. Ben Reiter is a senior writer. How about that? At Sports Illustrated, although it's spelled differently. You can follow him at Ben, Benreiter, and he is somewhere in the swamps of New Jersey and unearthed just an incredible story. Ben, first off, man, happy summer. Welcome into you. I know how much you love baseball and you love sports. I know you've been at SI a long time. Dude, be honest with me. Is this your Mona Lisa? I mean, 13 years in, have you ever had a story that has sort of followed you throughout social media the way this has this week?
I don't think so, Nestor. I mean, I've had some that have done well, certainly. Last summer, did a big story on Ken Griffey Jr., kind of diving into his life to a similar depth that did well. But really, the response to the Hideki Irabu story that just posted on Sports Illustrated and SI.com has been remarkable. And it's also kind of been remarkable in that it's all been kind of the same. Everybody's kind of like, oh, I remember that guy. Whatever happened to him? And then they're just kind of blown away, as I was when I spent, nearly 3 months reporting this story, by the twists and turns of his life and also the very sad way that it ended.
I don't mean to be, a bad guy here, but it was kind of a dead story, right? Like, it was a suicide thing. It showed up, on Sports Center. It showed up maybe on a timeline. I'm sure the Yankees lit a candle and said something nice at a national anthem or a moment of silence. And then there was silence, literally, right? Like, he was one of those dudes who was never beloved. He was a guy, come on, the joke was, I rob you, right? That was the Yankee joke. You're much closer to it. We were closer to it here because this was, look, I just wrote a huge book on Peter Angelos, right? And I'm releasing these chapters as they go. My Messina chapter comes out next week. That's chapter 13, right? And that's 2001, and I did it chronologically. 98, 99, 2000, those years when he was struggling and taking all that money from the Yankees were kicking everyone's ass. They were by far the best team. He was by far the one sort of square peg in the round hole that never really performed up to the level of all of those other legendary guys. And I think he had the whole weight of Japan on his shoulders. The best thing that probably ever happened to him was when other players started coming over and doing well, because it sort of pushed how poorly he did into the background, on the back end of Nomo and some other guys having some mixed success. He was supposed to be like the Nolan Ryan of Japan, right?
He was. And actually, Nestor, one of the many surprises that I kind of realized or uncovered when I was reporting the story was that he was not as bad as everybody remembers him as. He just wasn't. The numbers suggest that he was an okay pitcher, right? Look, first of all, he was a regular rotation member on the best team of all time, the 98 Yankees, and the 99 Yankees, who also ended up champions. Won AL Pitcher of the Month twice in those 2 years. And if you look at the sum of his performance, it wasn't terrible. He had like a 4.4 ERA in the thick of the steroid era. He was not a disaster. Relative to expectations, as you said, the Japanese Nolan Ryan, he's certainly disappointed. But this was not a guy who came over here and was an absolute bust. But look, the years have been unkind to him, man. The only thing that people remember, I found, in talking to people who hadn't really kept up with this story, is that insult that George Steinbrenner lobbed at him in spring training 1999, calling him the fat, pussy toad when he didn't cover first base in spring training. That's really all that anybody remembers when you say the name Hideki Irabu. But look, there's a lot more to know about this guy.
Well, it sort of harkens back to the meanness of George Steinbrenner that has been mirrored by the current man running our government in a very similar, demeaning fashion. I mean, Steinbrenner had no problem calling, Dave Winfield Mr. May, right? I mean, he had no problem hanging, a loser or a liar or a little man or a fat man, whatever the insult was. Steinbrenner sort of perfected that. And, as much as his legend is softened in death, those were words hung on him by a guy who paid him a lot of money to be Nolan Ryan of the Far East, right?
That's right. And, one of the funny things that I learned is that Steinbrenner actually apologized to Irabu for that comment about 5 minutes after he said it to the New York tabloid writers. He basically said, through his translator, look, I said something about you that's not very nice. It's going to come out. Just wanted to give you a heads up. Then about 3 or 4 months later, Steinbrenner's birthday in July, Hideki Irabu sent him a birthday present, which was a large mechanical toad when you pressed a button to signal his forgiveness for the insult as well. But look, part of it is because Irabu himself did not like the media. A big part of it has to do with the fact that he couldn't speak English at any point in his life. He never learned, couldn't express himself. But once those words escaped George Steinbrenner's lips, that was it. That's what Hideki Irabu was forever in New York.
Well, and I can't begin to tell you. I've spent a little bit of time in the Far East, and I've, had some friends that are from that part of the world, and, from a Buddhist background and a Far East background. The worst thing in the world you can do in the Asian culture is to lose face or to insult someone else. Like, insulting someone else, that's why when this dingbat gets on Twitter and insults people in China, he really has no idea the depth of what an insult and a personal insult means in that culture. It may be undefinable and unexpressible to people in this culture where every day you or I get called names on Twitter and it's a way of life here. That's not the way it rolls in Japan. That's just not the way that culture is set up.
I think that's right, but if only, nasty words from George Steinbrenner were the worst problems that Hideki Irabu had, right? Well, another thing that I forgot when I started to report the story is that he was not entirely ethnically Japanese. It had been reported that his father was a white American serviceman who was stationed over in Japan, had a relationship with his mother, and then left, right? I had forgotten this fact about him. But what this meant about him was that he grew up in a place that's very homogenous, that not welcoming to outsiders, which is Japan, specifically Osaka, which is the more provincial part in which he grew up. He grew up very different, right? Everybody there knew that he was not full, quote-unquote, Japanese. He was bigger. His eyes were rounder. He was a real target for bullies. And he spent much of his life looking for his identity, looking for his home. He didn't feel at home in Japan. And very tragically, he came over here thinking that maybe this is where he would find a home. And he did amazingly end up meeting his birth father once he got here. But he realized this is not his home either. This is a guy, as his agent Don Nomura summed up, was somebody who always seemed as if he was at the visitor's ballpark for his entire life.
When did this come to you? By the way, we're on the line with Ben Reiter from Sports Illustrated. He's written an incredible piece on Hideki Irabu and the life and times and the complications of Hideki Irabu, if you remember him at all. It's as fine a piece of research as I've read this summer, and many other writers are sharing it. But when does this come to you, bro? I mean, you're sort of kind of a little younger than me. You've been around this for a dozen years and looking for good stories and unearthing them. And I think behind any onion, you can peel it back. And if you're a writer and there's any level of interest in anything famous or, that wore a Yankees uniform, I think anybody that ever put a Yankees uniform on probably has an incredible story to tell. But what made the little light go off that you were going to chase this story around, Ben?
Well, I was talking with the baseball editor at Sports Illustrated, Emma Spann, and she said, hey, you know what? It's been 20 years since Hideki Irabu came over here. We both remembered that he had ended his own life about 6 years before. She said, how about trying to figure out what actually happened with this guy? What was the real story with Hideki Irabu? And I was like, that's a pretty interesting idea. And I started to look into it, and it's really kind of the father element of the story that hooks me. I don't know if it's because I'm a relatively new father myself, but that was something that I'd never heard before, really.
I didn't know that. By the way, I forgot he was dead. You know what I mean? Like, literally,
right.
A lot of baseball players die and weird things happen and they become a footnote. I mean, look at Len Dykstra running around. I mean, I understand Dutch Dalton is, very close to, having his life, passed before. And I found a picture of me and Dutch Dalton from 20 years ago. But, man, Arabu, I mean, I don't know what percentage of people even reading this remember that he died, right? I mean, that's a little bit unearthed to some degree, right?
Everybody remembers the Toad thing. Most people don't remember that he committed suicide, and nobody remembers the story that he had an American father. So I thought, you know what? I want to find out what led from his debut in 1998, an incredible debut at Yankee Stadium, which was really the high point, to the end of that rope 13 years later. And I also want to try to find this man who was his father, if I could. I did end up finding who his father was. He was an Army veteran named Steve Thompson, settled in Alaska eventually, and he himself died last year of lung cancer. But, since I found these two things, I really thought that we might have a story here that would speak to people and would make them reassess somebody who I think had a very kind of firm, concrete idea in most people's minds. And I think that's what happened. I'm getting a lot of messages of people saying, you know what, I actually feel bad about, booing him, about the way that I thought about him, about the assumptions I made about this guy. In fact, I've had a lot of people saying that it's making them reassess, any negative feeling they have about people they really don't know, which are those that they watch and cheer for and boo on sports fields every day.
Well, it wasn't hard to find people who came in contact with him, right? I mean, around the Yankees, around that era. I mean, hell, a lot of them are going to have, bust up in Cooperstown before it's all over. I mean, he played with, the who's who, with and against the who's who of everyone that mattered, especially during the steroid era, right?
It wasn't that hard, and certainly a number of the Yankees, his contemporaries, tried to get close to him, in particular David Cohn, who spoke very eloquently about him, and David Wells and Derek Jeter. But look, this is someone who was alienated from everybody else for a lot of reasons, culturally and language-wise. Like, he was there, they kind of knew him, but they couldn't really speak directly to him. So they didn't know him all that well. In fact, there aren't that many people out there who do know him that well. One guy who does is his translator, George Rose. When you're a translator, you're not just translating someone's language, you're kind of learning how their mind works. So George Rose is an invaluable source. But yeah, I mean, that idea that he was somebody who never found a home, never was grounded his entire life, is one that I really think is true and does a lot to explain everything about him, including why he was so up and down on the mound, which at this point seems like one of the least concerns.
Nice feeling when you put months into a project and someone sends you one little tweet and it's 2 words, great read, right? Like, when I've written books and I've written long stuff, I'm doing it right now. I'm releasing these chapters on the Peter Principles this week on Sid Thrift and Albert Bell and Mike Messina leaving. And if anybody gives me, because my chapters are as long as your story. I mean, I got chapters that are 4,000, 7,000, 10,000 words. When they sit there and read it and they take 25 minutes and they just send back, great read. There's nothing better than that, right?
Well, it's a good feeling, but I think the better feeling, as you know as a writer, Nestor, is just, finding something that's true and that affects people and getting it out there. A nice reaction is great to have, but I think you can be proud of work you do, even if people don't like it sometimes.
Well, I think anybody that's reading it, Ben's a baseball fan, and I know you're a lifer baseball fan. We're into the middle of this summer. I mean, for 25 years, I'm writing a book about Peter Angelos, trying to get into the mind of Peter Angelos and the deeds. You can only imagine what I've had to sift through here over 25. Yeah, dude, and good luck with it right on up until last Monday, right? I mean, they're still a sub-500 team. They're going out to the West Coast. I mean, they have no pitching. They have these, lap boy, writers writing that they should re-up Chris Tillman, whose ERA's north of 8. They have, Ubaldo is still the box of chocolates and can go out at any point and twirl you 7 innings of a 1-run ball. But I mean, the notion that the Orioles are in this thing, certainly the Yankees have backed up here a little bit this week. It's kind of a fascinating thing during the trading deadline to see who's in, who's out, and the Yankees are really sort of reaping some of the rewards of getting out last year and dealing themselves out. A lot of people felt like the Orioles should have done that last week.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think one thing that we saw this trade deadline is that a lot of teams in baseball are realizing that the second wild card, or at least any of the wild cards, are kind of fool's gold, and it's not worth sacrificing any part of your future for what could well be a one-and-done type of scenario. Like, we saw a lot of teams within striking distance. Like, the Twins are just 3 games back, right? They sold. The Rangers are 4 games back of a wild card spot. They gave away their 8th. Here are the Orioles. They're now 2 games back, and they didn't. You know, it was a bit curious. I'm not sure if Jeremy Hellickson is going to send them far into the playoffs. But on another level, you know, it might not make that much sense, but you got to respect it, right? I mean, they're in it. They have a chance. It might not be the intellectually smart thing to do, but if Kevin Gausman continues his renaissance here and you've got that really good back end of the bullpen healthy, you know, maybe you can sneak in. Who knows? That's what baseball's about. You know, you just want a chance.
Dude, I'm taking notes here, and because you're a writer and you use the big words, it might not intellectually be the thing to do. Yeah, dude, that might sum up 25 years of Peter Angelos' ownership. You know, it might intellectually not be the right thing to do, but damn it, I'm going to give Chris Davis $151 million or Albert Bell $60. You know, whatever it is, it really is sort of like bootstrap. There's no strategy here. I mean, Buck and Dan Duquette are gone at the end of next year, as is Machado, Jones, Brock, and Britton. So if you're going to say, well, I'm 88, 89 years old, and this is my last chance, a la Mike Ilitch, who's, you know, much more warm and fuzzy, as we saw through the Tigers wearing their Mr. I, you know, patches on their sleeves this weekend here. The notion that this team with this pitching can win a World Series this year, I mean, should be laughed at 115, 120 games into this thing, Ben.
Well, you bring up Mike Ilitch. Look, Peter Angelos turned 88 in July, right? So I don't know. Maybe he's saying, yeah, we could rebuild. We could go through a couple more years. Or maybe he's saying, you know what? These are my guys. I love Zach Britton. I love Adam Jones. He obviously loves Chris Davis. I wonder if he still does. We're going to let it ride for another year and a half. And then, you know what? There's no future, so who knows?
Well, right. I mean, maybe if you're that age, if that's what the press release says, I'll buy in on that. But certainly as a fan who's still hopefully going to be here in 2019 with the franchise, I mean, there's not a lot of thought around baseball that Manny Machado is going to wind up in an Oriole uniform, right?
No, but, you know, they could still trade him next summer and get a good package, right? I mean, if you can get a bunch of guys for Aroldis Chapman, like the top 5 prospect for 2 months of him, you'll probably do pretty well for Manny Machado, too.
Well, some thoughts about the prospects because, you know, position players were not moving at the deadline, right? I mean, it was really about pitching and really about relief pitching. A lot of things have changed here in the marketplace over the last 5 years with the way the Royals have won and the way the Cubs have won, the way the Indians have tried to win, that all of a sudden, you know, dealing Adam Jones or dealing Manny Machado or a position player, it didn't feel like it was bringing back the bounty that it has in the past, right?
It certainly didn't, and I understand. I get it. Look, relief pitching wins playoff games. We know that. We saw that last year. So everybody wants these kind of shut-down relievers. But I think that might create an inefficiency the other way, Nestor. I mean, the deal that shocked me, I thought maybe the best deal of this entire trade season was the J.D. Martinez deal from the Tigers to the Diamondbacks. J.D. Martinez, probably most people don't still notice it, but he has developed over the past 4 years now into legitimately one of the best sluggers in baseball. Consistently, all right? He's got an OPS over 900. That is like superstar caliber OPS, on-base plus slugging, over the past 4 years. And they traded him for like nobody anyone's ever heard of. There's no Gleyber Torres or anything in this deal. So maybe, you know, maybe that's the way to go. If everybody wants pitching, you go hitting. Maybe
Well,
that's what'll happen next year.
We got 7 weeks left. The Orioles are going to keep us awake late into the night. Ben, great job on Hideki Irabu. Always love coming to grab you and talking some baseball with you. We're going to send everybody out to SI to follow along, and you should absolutely read The Seeker, Hideki Irabu's complicated life and death. And you can also follow Ben at Ben Reiter, Reiter. What's next for you? Just pennant race baseball here. Plenty to latch on to, though, right, over the next few weeks.
Yeah, we'll be busy with the pennant race, and we'll do a deep dive into something else. Don't want to give it away just yet.
All right. Well, maybe it'll be a deep dive into the Orioles if they get back into this race next month. Ben, take care of yourself. Enjoy the rest of the summer. Make sure you're eating fresh fruits and vegetables here during my favorite produce season.
Thanks.
That's my warning to everyone. He is Ben Reiter out at SI. He's been there for 13 years, getting it done. Wrote a great piece on Hideki Irabu that you should read. He's also a great follow out on Twitter as well at Ben Reiter, BenReiter at SI.com. You can find me, Nasty, at WNST.net, out on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, and streaming live right here on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. The morning newspaper arrives in your email inbox free of charge each and every morning at 7 a.m. That's all powered up by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com. If there's any breaking news at all, you get it first on the WNST Tech Service. That's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. And, of course, Dennis will be here on Thursday getting you ready for fake football. Never feels fake when it's the Redskins, but it's still fake, and we'll be watching it. Go Ryan Mallett. Do the voodoo that you do. Last but never least, all of our content is held in the Buy a Toyota Audio Vault so that you can listen anytime you want. It's all housed there on the website in the buyatoyota.com Audio Vault. You can also download the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear. Many people hitting me about London next month. Yes, big party on Saturday in London. Keep your Saturday free. We've got a hell of an itinerary we're putting together for you and a little purple parade of our own through East London. You don't even need the accent. You can bring your Baltimore accent. It works perfectly. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.